in these unprecedented times of uncertainty, unrest, we look for sources of comfort, of solace, of meaning. And as people of spirituality, we're turning to our ancient scriptures, Hindu scriptures, which hold this vast reservoir of universal wisdom, which we hope to tap into and apply into our daily lives, even now while we're quarantined at home, and see how we can make better sense of ourselves, the world around us, and our place within it. Where, if anybody was joining last time, you'll remember that we left it on somewhat of a cliffhanger. So it's appropriate to say that previously on Timeless Hindu Wisdom, we were talking about the Mahabharat, and specifically a conversation that happened between Duryodhana and Dronacharya. Duryodhana was the eldest of the Kauravas, the 100 sons of the Kuru clan. Their mentor was Dronacharya. The question that Duryodhana asks his teacher is that all this time we've been fighting against the Pandavas, our cousins, but every time we're losing. What is the difference between Arjun and me? Dronacharya explains that there are two reasons. There are two reasons fundamentally which differentiate between Arjun and Duryodhana. And Dronacharya explains that it's because of these two reasons that their victory was certain and you are always going to lose. The first reason he gives is that the Pandavas, they knew what hardship was. They were born in the forest. They had to navigate tremendous challenges and hardships through their lives. And because they built up this resilience, they could bounce back, they could cope with setbacks and challenges. They were much stronger in spirit and in mind. And so they already had an advantage over the Kauravas. But where was this resilience rooted? Where did it stem from? That's the second reason that Dronacharya explains to Duryodhana. The second reason why Arjun and the Pandavas will always win is because they have what he calls yoga. Now, here yoga has a much broader meaning. It's not the yoga that we sometimes understand today. He wasn't doing headstands in the middle of the battlefield. When Dronacharya says Arjun had yoga, he means he had the union. He was connected with God. He had Krishna on his side. If we go back to an earlier story within the Mahabharata itself, there was a critical moment when actually the war was won and lost even before it came to the battlefield. It was when the war was decided that war is imminent, and despite Krishna's and everyone's efforts to reconcile, to bring about peace, and when Duryodhana was absolutely steadfast, bullheaded enough to say, no, I won't even give a pin's head worth of land back to the Pandavas, that's when both Duryodhana and Arjun came to Krishna for help. Now, Krishna had already decreed that he would never take up any weapons in this war. He would simply remain a charioteer at best. Now, on one hand, Krishna had said, I can give this whole battalion that I have to fight against which party that chooses. On the other hand, I will be available, but I will not carry any weapons whatsoever. So when Duryodhana and Arjun come to Krishna seeking help, Duryodhana was absolutely clear what he wanted. He didn't want Krishna. He wanted power. He wanted military. What good is Krishna without any weapons? When they came to Krishna, he was actually resting in his inner quarters. They came and Arjun, he sat at Krishna's feet. Duryodhana, he sat at Krishna's head. When Krishna opened his eyes, he saw Arjun first. And he realized why both were there. He said, "You've both come. I know you come seeking my help. What do you really want? You know that on one side, there is my entire army. On the other is just me, without any weapons." Before Arjun could even speak, Duryodhana butts in. He says, "I came here first. I have the first choice." Everybody thought that if Duryodhana gets the first choice, then he would obviously choose the army. Then what would be left for Arjun? Arjun wasn't worried. When Duryodhana asks for Krishna's army, Arjun says, "Well, I have no need for an army. As long as I have you, Krishna, by my side, as my charioteer, leading me through war, I will always win. I am assured of that." On the one hand, we know that the Kauravas had a great army. They had 11 Akshauhini Senas, 11 battalions, each, what we counted, 200,000 people in their forces. The Pandavas had far less. They had only 7 Akshauhini Senas. So in terms of pure military force, the Pandavas were overpowered by a great factor. But yet, Arjun chose Krishna because he had realized him to be God. It was that faith that with God by my side, I am invincible. I will be absolutely protected and safe. Duryodhana Dronacharya reminds Duryodhana, it was at that moment that the war was won and lost. You chose military power. Arjun chose God. It's our choices, far more than our ability, far more than our intelligence, far more than our talents, our pedigree, our postcode, our degrees, that truly define us. Our entire life is a reflection of our choices, isn't it? When we wake up in the morning, do we hit that snooze twice or 3 times or 5 times? Do we wake up or not? When we wake up, what do we do? How do we go through life? How do we apply ourselves at school or college or university or at work? How do we apply ourselves in relationships? How do we respond to complaints, to allegations, to a thumbs down on one of our posts on social media, to a stray comment? How do we respond to criticism in the workforce? How do we respond to backbiting, turf wars in the office? It's these things. If we are not careful, those critical moments which can define our entire life. Arjun, at that very moment, won the battle because he chose faith. Faith in God. He knew when the odds are stacked against you, it doesn't matter. With God on your side, you're always in the majority. The whole world can be against you. But if you're with God, your victory is assured. We see that throughout the battle. When we know that this story was embedded as a part of Arjun's vengeance against Jayadratha. Now when Arjun is returning, he's fulfilled his pratigna. There's a very interesting aspect to this whole battle. Arjun has done his job. He's killed Jayadratha. Now he's won. And the sun sets, and when he comes back to his pavilion, everyone is congratulating him. Everyone is patting his back and saying, "Wow, well done. You really came through. You killed Jayadratha before sunset. You truly are the archer second to none." At that point, there's a very nice description about Arjun. Vyasji says that he is embarrassed. A person of great talent, of great bravery. He is embarrassed in victory. Why? Arjun says something very, very powerful. He says, Anascharyo jayastesham yesham nathosi keshava. Anascharyo jayastesham. He says, why should there be any surprise in my victory? It was certain. Why? Yesham nathosi keshava. Because Krishna was on our side. God is on our side. The moment they had chosen God, their victory was assured. In those most critical of moments, do we decide to side with God? Because that faith is what gives us the strength to carry on. That strength for Arjun to be resilient, to fight on, came from his knowledge that Krishna was on his side. Vivekananda Swami used to say as well, it is our faith in God which provides the greatest strength of society. The moment that we relinquish that strength, that faith in God, is the moment that society begins to die. Our faith in God. It's hard. Faith is hard. People think faith is for the weak-hearted, for the weak-minded, for the infantile. It's something that we use as a crutch. Children have created this father figure to run to for succor. I think it's quite the opposite. Faith requires great moral strength. It's an invisible force that you have to tap into, you have to have faith in. Isn't that what surrender is? Surrender is not giving up. It's giving up to a higher power. It's knowing that there is something much more powerful, that even though it's invisible. Look at the virus around us. Why is it so hard for people to stay at home? Why do the government and Public Health England and NHS and all these experts have to keep telling us day in, day out, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives? Because we can't see the virus. It's an invisible enemy. If we could see the virus all around us outside, would we really go out? When we see the enemy with guns and cannons, then we cower behind our couches. It's that invisible enemy that we can't always fathom. Equally, there is this invisible force, the power of God that we need to connect to. Surrender isn't giving up, it's connecting. It's like Wi-Fi. Are we scared of Wi-Fi? We'd be scared without Wi-Fi. Can you imagine being locked down at home without Wi-Fi? God forbid. We are surviving, let's be honest, because of not just our family being there, it's because of the access that we have. When you have Wi-Fi, you're connecting to the rest of the world. We are connected. Thousands of people around the world are connected through this invisible force. Now imagine if we could connect to the power of God. You know what they say? If you're the smartest person in a room, you're in the wrong room. Smart people choose to associate themselves with smarter people. Smart leaders hire people that are smarter than them to guide them, to create a team which is much more powerful than one single person. Now imagine connecting with the smartest person, the strongest, the most talented, the purest. That's what faith is. Choosing to connect with God. That is what helps us survive challenge after challenge after challenge. Bhagwan Swaminarayan once wanted to teach this lesson to his bhaktas, to his devotees. So once he took them to a riverbank. And he was a great teacher. He was very practical, and he liked to show rather than tell. So he took a nail, a rusty old crooked nail, and he threw it into the water. And as you can imagine, it sunk. He asked the devotees, did you see what happened? They said, yes, it sank. Okay. Next experiment, he took a twig, a bit of a log, and he threw that into the water. As expected, it started floating. He asked again, did you see what happened? They said, yes, it floated. And then he did something quite remarkable. He took another piece of wood, and he took another nail, and he embedded the nail into the wood. And then he threw both into the water. Now what happened? The nail, which previously on its own had sunk, was now floating merrily across the water. He asked the devotees, "Do you see what happened here?" He explained, "Look, as Jews, we are in this ocean, the sansara, the ocean of life and death. We will be sinking in our sorrows, in our trials and tribulations, amongst our challenges, in Maya. What we seek is this connectivity, God. If we can attach ourselves, then through His power, He transcends Maya, transcends this world. Then through that connectivity, we can rise above, even though we don't have that force in ourselves. We can rise above our challenges, rise above our troubles, rise above anything that can, any wave along this ocean of life that can be thrown at us." So, what is faith? It's that assurance that we are going to be saved because we have chosen God. In the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, there is a beautiful verse which encapsulates the meaning of Sharanagati, surrender. Again, it's not a weakness, it's not giving up. It's a power that you tap into. Because in this day and age, we think, we are brought up with these values of, we value our liberal, our independence, our autonomy. And anything that will encroach upon that is supposed to be frowned upon. But as we learned, connecting with God is not a weakness. It's not surrender in the sense of outer point of weakness. It's a show of strength. The aspects of Sharanagati which are described, 6 aspects of Sharanagati which are described in this verse, one of them is Rakshasati iti Vishvaso. There's 6 aspects. Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam. Rakshasati iti Vishvaso, goptrutve varanam tatha. Atmanikshepana karpanye, shadvida shranagatihi. In the 6 aspects, it talks about Rakshasati iti Vishvaso. I will be protected. That faith is what carries us through life. And so, as we've been discussing the Mahabharat and this grand war, this challenge that faces us, we too have to remember that like Arjun, the war wasn't won or lost on the battlefield. It was won in the choices that he made. When we are faced with choices in our school, in work, at home, in relationships, it's the choices that we make in terms of choosing brute force, materialism, our talents or intelligence. It's not a one or the other. It's making sure that we don't forsake God. We choose God to be at our side. And through His powers, through His love and grace and mercy, we have the absolute assurance that we will win. And as Arjun said, Anascharyo Jayastesham Yesham Nathosi Keshava. With God by our side, our victory is absolutely assured and unsurprising. Thank you. We've also received a few questions. Thank you to everyone who's sent in their questions. We've received a great number of responses from all over the world, in fact. So please do keep that coming. That's very encouraging. There will be various other speakers throughout this series who will be able to respond to our questions as much as we can. In fact, we're contemplating having another session just in response to these questions. Some of them are very, very good. We'll try to take as many as we can each time. We've received a number based on last week's session, so I'll try to read out the first one here. One of the questions received was, many of them were quite common, so we tried to club them together. One of the questions here is, how can the Mahabharata help us enhance our lives in this difficult period of time. The Mahabharat is in a different era. So how can all the positive principles be applied in this modern age? So, a very valid question, and it's understandable that something which seems so ancient, so of a different culture, different context, how will that really apply here? As we mentioned during our the opening last week, yes, the contexts have changed. Arjuna is in war and battle. For us, maybe it's an exam, maybe it's a university application, maybe it's a job interview, maybe it's something to do with the family, with business, or maybe it's this virus. Our challenges will differ. But the wisdom that our scriptures impart apply universally because they're responding to universal realities. Things like God and the soul, but also the human condition, our human shortcomings, our human weaknesses. I remember a couple of years ago there was a great discovery in Indonesia off the island of Borneo. In a cave, they'd found a wall painting, 40,000-year-old, a hand stencil. Somebody, ancient people, had stamped their hand on a wall. Now, sociologists, anthropologists were trying to make sense of this. And it was fascinating because somebody 40,000 years ago wanted to leave a message on a wall. Now, I think that sounds familiar to people who are using social media. 40,000 years ago, somebody, like you see on a wall, graffiti, Banksy was here. Somebody left a mark saying, I was here. What does that tell us? 40,000 years ago, people's need for attention, for response, to share, to have some sort of validation, has been abiding. It's not changed. The medium has changed. People are literally painting something on the wall. Here we're posting something on a virtual wall. In the same way, contexts change. But the principles, the values of resilience, of faith, they remain abiding. And we're using these ancient scriptures with the universal wisdom which transcends time and geography. It applies, it's equally applicable to everyone, of every nation, of every generation, and seeing how we can use those teachings of spirituality, of faith, practical values to help us cope with this current situation. So as I said, the context may change, but the principles are actually eternal and timeless. And that's why we turn to our scriptures, and that's why we say they hold this timeless wisdom. Another question. My question for this timeless episode is that how do we turn our frustration into motivation rather than causing sadness? This is a very important question. I'm sure many of us are facing this right now at home, especially with all the uncertainty. There's frustration. You don't know how your exams are going to be marked, how you're going to be evaluated for your coursework, how that will impact your university choices or offers that you received, or promotion at work, or mortgages. All sorts of variables are facing us, and we simply don't know. We simply don't know when this lockdown is going to end, when will normality resume. These are all questions which are lingering, nagging at us. And so these frustrations are real. Let's not paper over that. But if we can understand where they stem from, ultimately it's our expectations. When those expectations aren't met, you expect 3 A's and you end up, or 9s now at GCSE, and you end up with 8s and 7s. You're expecting A stars at before, and now you end up with B's. You're expecting to go to a top university, instead you have to go to somewhere else because your expectations aren't met. You post something and you're expecting 50 likes, and instead you get only 10. How do you deal with disappointment, with failure? That's what we talked about, right? Resilience. It's understanding that sometimes things won't go your way. But, as we learned here as well, even with Arjun, there is a higher power that we're tapping into. And it's that connectivity with God that's going to help us, empower us, and give us that moral strength to overcome these challenges, overcome these unfulfilled expectations. It's like, when you have this, it's with God, it's relationship, this faith, right? You have to build upon it. Sometimes, first thing in the morning you wake up and you check your phone because you want to see all the WhatsApp messages that you missed while you were asleep. The world did not fall apart while you were asleep for 10 hours. But nevertheless, you want to check. And you respond as much as you can. Imagine being blue-ticked, right? That means you send somebody a message and they don't respond. Or sometimes, or in an email, it goes into spam. When God is giving us this wisdom, this power to tap into, if we are blue-ticking that, how will that feel? Or conversely, if we feel that we are praying and we are trying to connect with God, but God is not responding and He's blue-ticking us, that feels pretty bad. But there is a response. There is always a response. Sometimes the response is no. Sometimes the response is wait. Sometimes the response is later. But when we have that response, when we have that connection, there is always that faith that we will be protected. There's a nice a story that I read many years ago. I'm assuming it's true. When it's about the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge was it's an iconic building in America. Bridge in America. When it was completed in 1937, it was the largest, tallest, and longest suspension span bridge of its time. When it was being completed, they knew that it had to be painted. And there was a red, special dark, deep red orange that they wanted to color it, giving it a golden color to make it stark and rise above the fog of San Francisco. But when the people were painting it, they found that many people were falling. It's so high; it's 700 feet tall or something above the sea level. That's huge. That's probably over 10 times taller than the height of this mandir here, Nisan Temple. About twice as tall as Big Ben here. That's huge. So when people were actually painting it, they were falling and they were breaking limbs. They were sometimes falling to their death. And so the company decided to create a net underneath, a safety net, so that in case anybody fell, they'd be caught. Now, interestingly, after the net put up, after great cost and great effort, after the net was put up, nobody fell. So they went back to the workers and said, "Look, hold on, you're painting at great heights, you're working at great heights, and before you were falling, and now you're not falling. Why not?" They said, "Before we were scared, we were anxious. What if we fell? What would happen?" It's that uncertainty that was really plunging us down. Now the net's there, we know that there's somebody there to catch us. Rakshashati iti vishvaso is this. We know that with God by our side, even though He is silent, even though He is invisible, actually you can hear Him. You can see Him. This virus, it's invisible to the naked eye, but with the right tools, with microscopes, it can be seen. In the same way, God can be experienced. It's a spiritual phenomenon. It's not physical. For a physical thing, you need eyes or glasses or telescopes or microscopes. But for something so powerful, so subtle, you need tools of faith. And it's that faith which helps us through these moments of frustration. And that, when you have that confidence, that trust that with God by my side, He will protect me and I will emerge victorious at the end of the day, like Arjun. Even though they had less military power and they were at a great disadvantage, with God, we will emerge victorious. We will get through this. So if we choose faith above frustration, above wallowing in self-pity, if we choose faith, it helps us rise above all these challenges of unfulfilled expectations, of uncertainty, of failure, of disappointment. And we can find stability and comfort and fulfillment.